it's Mo. It is November and I wanted to talk about the books that are on my DNF shelf. I do this video every year where I go through the books throughout the year and throughout previous years that I've DNF'd. I keep all the books that I read throughout the year on a red shelf, and then at the end of the year, well, really in the beginning of the new year, I go through those books and I do a keep or toss. So am I going to keep them and put them on my real bookshelf, or am I going to donate them or give them away or give them to friends, or sometimes return them to people who I borrowed them from? I also do this video where I talk about all the books on my DNF shelf. So I usually do this at the end of November. So I may have some books from December that I'm going to DNF. I hope so. I feel like every year I've been DNFing a few more books here and there, and I think this year I DNF'd quite a few books. These are just the physical books that I DNF'd. There may have been an audiobook or two that I DNF'd, but because they weren't on my physical shelf, I'm not going to include them here. I know that the book that I DNF'd last year was The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalia Harris. This is a thriller, kind of a domestic thriller about an office where there is only one black woman working and then the other black girl comes to work. I only got to page 91, so I don't know if our main character is going to be the stalker, if the other person is going to be the stalker. I think this is a well-loved book, but I really didn't get on with the writing style. I don't know if the author was trying to be pandering or talking down to white readers who don't usually read black authors. That very well could have been a device of the book, but I definitely felt like that, and it felt very fake, and it felt very disingenuous, and I just did not enjoy it. So this is going to be a DNF forever. I kept it on my shelf all year so that I could talk about it here, but I'm definitely going to DNF this one. And Suzanne, if you haven't gotten this book and you still want it, let me know and I'll send it to you. The rest of these I don't know the order of, but I did DNF 92 in the Shade by Thomas McGuane at only page number 15, which is funny because on page number 14 there's a New Jersey reference, so I did mark that, but then I stopped reading this at page 15 and I really haven't thought about it again, although I did recently see something about it that made me want to pick it up again. So I'm going to keep this one on my shelves. I'm going to put it back on my TBR. This is a mystery thriller, amateur detective, I think, maybe even like mafia novel written about Florida. I have in the past liked books written about Florida. That's actually something I'm going to talk about more in another video. And actually that gives me an idea for another video where it'd be interesting to talk about like what state you've read the most books about and why that is. Like whether it's because you particularly like that state, maybe it's the state you lived in. So that's a good idea for the future. 92 in the Shade just wasn't hitting me right at the time. Like I said, I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to put it back on my TBR shelf. Another book that I've had for a really long time and I didn't get very far in, although I did get further into this one than I have before. I got to page 32, is On Modern Marriage and Other Observations by Isak Dinesen. This is just an incredibly dry, hard to digest book. I don't know if that's the translation because this was translated by Anne Bourne, or if it's partly the time period that this was written in, or if it is the subject matter because Isak Dinesen did struggle in her marriage and with the idea of marriage and relationship. She was definitely influenced from a lot of different things, some of them really bad, some of them that we would not talk about today. So it was just really hard to get to. These are all essays and short works that came about from her writing letters to her brother about his marriage, about her marriage, about union and marriage in general. I'm going to keep this one. I think what I'm going to do with this one is put it on my red shelf. I have a good idea for my red shelf about books that I haven't read yet, which we'll talk about in another video as well. Sorry to keep teasing other videos. But I'm not going to put this directly on my TBR because I don't think I'm going to get through this anytime soon. But this is a great vintage copy and one that I will want to keep and maybe get to at some point. I tried to read Curdle Creek by Yvonne Battle Felton a couple of times this year. I don't know how far I got into it because I did start reading this on audio the last time I read it. The first time I tried to read a couple of pages physically, then I tried to read it on audio, and it's just not the book for me. I won this book in a Goodreads giveaway. It is very cute. It is very pretty. I really like the cover. I like the idea of it, which is about a young woman growing up in a very specific society and where women's place is in that. But what I didn't realize is that it is like a puritanical society, and something that I've discovered about myself is that I really hate puritanical books. Like, I hate the way books like that are written. I hate reading about them. I don't like them at all. So I was hoping this was going to be more like Southern Gothic and it was more puritanical. So this is going to be a DNF forever. So I am going to unhaul this one. Marty's telling me to hurry up with this video because he just pooped in the litter box. He's stinking me out of the place. Another book that I didn't get very far into is God Dies by the Nile by Nawal al-Saadawi. I got to chapter 5, page 37. I really enjoyed, well, enjoyed is a strong word because it's not really an enjoyable book, but I enjoyed my time with Woman at Point Zero. I am very excited to read more Nawal al-Saadawi, but her books are extremely heavy. And I was reading this, can't remember when, maybe during Shirley September, and I stopped reading it because I just felt like it was going to go in a very dark place, and I just wasn't in the right headspace for that. I will definitely keep this one on my shelf, and I will definitely come back to it. I just have to be in the right mood to read such a heavy book. Another Goodreads giveaway that I won was Bluff by Denise Smith. This is a collection of poetry, and I read quite a bit out of this. Not this much, not half, because I did skip a bunch of poems, but these poems are all really weird. I was kind of reading just the ones that made sense to me at the time, and I will probably continue to dip in and out of this one like that. There's also a whole addendum to this, a whole extra collection of poems that are online, and that really just stymied me when I was reading. I got to that section and I was like, oh my god, I don't think I can look at that whole collection of extra poems, like a whole other book's worth of poems. This is quite a long collection in general, almost 150 pages, which is long for poetry, so I do plan on continuing this one at some point, dipping in and out. I'm very thankful to have won it in a Goodreads giveaway as well as this one, but it is definitely a DNF for now. Another book that's a DNF forever, I think, is going to be Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawyer. This was a tough one because this is a queer classic, and I got really far into it. I got to page 178, and that's like 2/3 of the way through the book. I was super excited to find this at a library book sale. I was super excited to read this queer classic, which has to do with kind of gender identity and gender fluidity and men and women and everything in between, the whole spectrum of gender, and about specifically one creature who can change gender at will. I was excited to kind of have the more maybe sci-fi aspects of this, or have this story wrapped up in a sci-fi way. And I just found it to be a lot about going to bars and picking people up and clubbing and not really living a full life, even when you can live as every gender and every spectrum of genders. I found it to be really repetitive and really boring, so I will not be continuing on with this one. I mean, I'm glad that I read what I read of it, and you never know, if I was going to try this one again, maybe I would try it on audio. And I'm sad to DNF a book by a trans author and a queer classic, but I'm just not going to finish this one. And I'm not going to keep it on my shelves. Another book that I started and got a lot of the way through, Richard Wright's 8 Men. I was actually reading this for the TBR spin, which I've completely fallen off of doing now, the TBR spin in general. And this is a collection of short stories, 8 short stories about 8 men. I think I read 4 or 5 of them more than half. I know that because I think I stopped in the middle of one story and I was enjoying a lot of them, and some of them have definitely stuck with me. But I wasn't in the mood for short stories. I was really dragging my feet on it. I was hoping that I could catch back up on TBR Spin. Like I said, I never did. So I decided to just DNF this one. This is definitely a DNF for now, and I will definitely be coming back to this one. The most recent book that I DNF'd, which I only DNF'd after a few pages. I started reading this one physically. I read a few pages, and then I started reading it on audio, so I don't know exactly where I was, is Damon Galgut's The Promise. This is a South African author, and this is a South African story about a family who owns property in South Africa, and the mother passes away, and when the mother passes away, she tells the father that they need to give part of their land, the house that their servants live in, to their servants, because the servants are Black South Africans and they have served the family well, and they took care of the wife and mother of this family while she was dying, and she makes the husband promise. But the husband is really wrapped up in like the Catholic Church and in religion. He kind of found religion recently, and so this is told from the perspective of their daughter, I believe, their daughter, maybe their son, but a younger person in the family who overheard this promise and attempts to make their dad keep the promise that the dad gave to the mom. I didn't realize that this was told from a young person's perspective. I'm not too into that. I couldn't get into the writing. I found it to be very clunky. I don't know if that's just the author's style or just the way this book is written or because it's supposed to be told from a child's perspective, but I was not getting on with it. I will keep this because I think the idea of it is really interesting. Another part that I didn't realize was the whole church part of it and the religious aspect of it. And so I wasn't super excited about that part of the story, but I will give it another try. I also have another novel by Damon Galgut. Maybe I'll try that one first, and then if I can get into that one, I'll go back to this one. This is one that's gonna go right back on the TBR. Finally, the last DNF that I'm gonna talk about right now is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. I got to almost halfway through this book, a little over a third of this book, page 161, which is the beginning of a chapter. Miracle Creek is by Angie Kim, and this one hurts because I really liked some short stories that I've read by Angie Kim, and I was really excited to read this novel, which is her debut. This is about a Korean family who moves to the US with like the promise and the excitement of a better life, and the father has to stay in Korea for a while, so the mother has to go and work in Virginia at like a convenience store, and it's not what they think it's going to be. They think it's more going to be an opportunity, but the people that she ends up staying with see her more as like easy, cheap labor. She brings their daughter over, and because the daughter goes to American school, because the daughter is taken away from her father, because their culture is kind of erased by never being able to see each other, because the mother works so much, their family grows more distant. The relationship between the mother and daughter become more distant, and when the father of the family eventually does come over, they pivot and change their whole lifestyle. So the lifestyle that the mom and the daughter got used to now is different, and this book really is about their relationship and that familial relationship, but it's all kind of hinged on that the father starts a new business, and when a accident happens during that new business and someone is killed, he has to be put on trial. People have to be put on trial about this accident. So it becomes mostly about a court case and about this accident, and then we see through flashbacks to all the different people involved. So all the people involved in this accident, the people who were patients of the father, the people who were connected to the father, the family, and it was so not my type of book. Just not my type of book. I don't like courtroom dramas. I don't really like family sagas, which this kind of sort of felt like. There was a mystery element and a suspense element, but it felt fairly obvious to me. I gotta say, I don't know like how the accident occurred. Like I don't know the final conclusion of the mystery. I couldn't guess it. I would have to read it, but like by the point that I got to in this book, I also did not care. And I didn't love the writing, which is weird, again, because I had read those short short stories, and I really enjoyed her writing in those. So unfortunately, this is a DNF forever. I do have Angie Kim's next book, which is Happiness Falls, and I would definitely try to read that one and continue reading from this author, but this book wasn't for me. So we have 4 books that I'm unhauling forever, and 6 books that are going back on the TBR or somewhere in my house. So let me know if you've DNF'd any of the books that I DNF'd here. Let me know if you've read any and really enjoyed them. Let me know what your DNF rate is. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!